Welcome to the No Ceilings March Madness live show. I'm Tyler Metcalf. He is Stephen Gillaspie. Stephen, we got 8 teams left. It's wild how time flies. These past 2 weeks have been just a whirlwind of awesome matchups. Yeah, it's a little chalky. We have 3 1 versus 2 matchups, 1 versus 3, but the matchups are going to be really good. We're going to get into all of it after we recap Friday night's games. Some really good ones there. But buddy, just a couple days ago, we were on here gloating about how all of our teams are in the Sweet 16. We were sitting pretty. We were feeling good, and just like that, they're all gone. How are we doing?
Like sand through the hourglass, So these are the days of our lives. Shout out to everybody who even knows what the hell I'm talking about with that. But yeah, I figured it. Like I've been telling y'all, the way that they were celebrating Calipari was just like, okay, they're about to put him down. They're about to take him behind the shed, and it's just Arkansas season's over. They celebrated too much, but it's been good. I understand the discourse. I think that basketball is like the only sport where misery is what sells. You know what I mean? Like, how dare we have all these awesome basketball teams all playing against each other at the same time? Like, why can't we get someone in who is punching above their weight class and is going to just get smashed at this time of year? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just think that basketball loves misery and attracts it for whatever reason now. So I don't know. I'm happy with the seeding. I'm happy with the matchups we have. We had some great ones that we're going to recap today, and man, the Elite Eight is just going to be so fun to watch.
Yeah, we have some very, very, very good Elite Eight matchups, and I know everyone loves upsets and all that kind of stuff, but the reason I love I love the tournament is because it gives us the opportunity to see really high level basketball, really high level matchups, high level prospects and players in situations that we don't always get them. And half the season is conference play, and we kind of get used to a lot of the same matchups. And when things go right and they go a little chalk, I get that it can be boring for the casual fan, but this is the type of matchups that we want in the tournament. We'll get to the preview in a little bit here, but first, we got to start out recapping Friday night's games. Let's start out Michigan State over Ole Miss, 73-70. Really, really fun game. We were really curious kind of how Jace Richardson was going to bounce back. He's kind of done that all year, whether it's a rough half, he bounces back in a big way in the second half. When they had their West Coast trip, he kind of struggled for those 2 weeks and then bounced back and had an incredible end to the last month of his season. Round of 32, he was like 1 of 10 shooting, really brutal game. They're able to overcome it, and he comes into this Ole Miss game and plays fantastic basketball with 20 points on 6 of 8 shooting, 4 of 6 from 3 with 6 rebounds, no assists, but that's kind of his role right now. But Cohen Carr was kind of the X factor too, with 15 points on 6 of 10 shooting. Sean Padula continued his excellent play with 24, 4, 3, and 2 steals. Ole Miss just kind of couldn't find consistency from anyone else on that team or hit those big shots down the stretch. When you were kind of watching this game or came away from it, what were kind of some of your main reactions?
Well, let's start with Jace because he's the, as we see Dirty Dancer, the NBA draft MVP, Dirty Dancer, world-renowned, well-traveled. Jace was solid. Just little to no mistakes. It was a very quiet 20 points. It didn't feel like he was imposing his dominance to me because who I felt was posing themselves with Cohen Carr. I was very happy to see him be so aggressive. The wingspan on is just ridiculous. He is just able to do so much with away from the ball. He comes up with tough plays all the time. Rebounds well. He does so much to influence the game, and whenever it's hitting and it comes across with a score, fulfillment, it was just so much fun. So I was pleasantly surprised to see Cohen Carr play the way that he did. It was just lights out. It was so good.
Your connection's a little rough. You're kind of coming in and out, so apologies on that. But agreed. I mean, he just plays really simple, really kind of within himself. And I mean, he really got going where it seemed like Ole Miss tried to kind of go to his zone, and then guys lost him in the gap at kind of above the break a little bit on the elbow there, and he kind of got a couple just wide open jumpers that he was able to knock down in rhythm, and then that opened up opportunities for him to kind of get downhill, to attack closeouts, get into the middle of the floor, and that's kind of where we've seen most of his passing and kind of playmaking flashes come from, are in those types of situations, or as like the second side DHO kind of stuff. And he really kind of popped in those ways. I know he had 0 assists, but that ability to kind of initiate that scramble defense by Ole Miss and kind of get things moving and get them off balance and get them in less advantageous situations sparked a lot of that ball movement from Michigan State and opened up opportunities for guys like Cohen Card to make those backdoor cuts, to utilize his athleticism to get to the rim. And Cohen Card is someone who's done a really good job of just kind of improving steadily and finding those open spots and situations to counter what the defense gives, because he is a non-shooter right now. I think he made one. I think it was like 1 of 2 from 3. I know he
Yeah.
knocked down at least one. But teams forget about him because he is that non-shooter, which opens up so many opportunities for him to cut back door, to catch them sleeping. And he's continued to improve throughout his career at MSU. With that, obviously, we know how good he is in the open court because of that athleticism. But it just seemed like a couple mental mistakes by Ole Miss allowed Jace to get into that early rhythm, get some really clean, like practice shots almost, because of how wide open he was. And then that just kind of was the like tsunami that kind of took everything over and just allowed Michigan State to kind of hold off Ole Miss down the stretch there.
Yeah, I mean, Coach Izzo did such a great job, especially down the stretch, because it felt like Ole Miss was gonna really have an opportunity to kind of come away with this game. But down the stretch, that Spartan defense was really locked down. And again, Cohen was just so phenomenal. I jumped out of my seat on that pass where Michigan State tipped the ball, and then Cohen Carr came down crashing and cocked it back and slammed it down. I literally leapt out of my seat because he's got such freakish athleticism. I would love to see him kind of tap into that offense a little bit more, kind of like in an Otega Owe type of role, which we'll talk about him here soon. But he just does so much of like the junkyard stuff that it's so much fun to watch. But again, coming back to Jace, I was just he's so fluid. It makes everything look so easy. Nothing is forced. Even whenever he was attacking the basket and getting to the rim, it seemed like it was just kind of easy for him. But I got to give Sean Padula a big shout because he was the only one that was consistent for that Mississippi team. I mean, Brakefield had a good game, in the Sweet 16 and then or going into the Sweet 16 and just kind of laid a dud. Malik Dia wasn't as efficient as what we had used to been seeing. And Padula was really the only one kind of keeping it together. So big shout out to him. Forced a couple of big errors for Michigan State, hit a couple of big threes. I mean, just a big time confidence, so much swag to his game. He went down swinging, and he was pretty much the only one that did.
Okay, speaking of Otega Owe, Kentucky Wildcats fall to Tennessee 78-65. This just felt like a classic Tennessee win where they kind of get out to that 10 to 15 point lead pretty quickly in the first half and then just keep it there all game. They don't pull away. They don't, Zombieland double tap, make sure that their opponent's dead, but
Yep.
they never let them back into it. And they just kind of keep them at arm's length. They do the little things. They milk the clock. They control the pace. They dominate the boards and they play really physical. It just felt like a patented Tennessee Rick Barnes victory. I believe this would have been 3 straight wins for Kentucky over Tennessee. If they would have pulled it off, Tennessee was having none of it. Zakai Ziegler with a big offensive game, 18 points, 10 assists. Lanier added 17, despite only going 1 of 6 from 3. Gainey off the bench was 16. But the big kind of standout here was the rebounding and how Tennessee out rebounding Kentucky 34-24. And it was kind of one of those weird situations where the team who shot better from 3 didn't win. And that's kind of the trend that we're seeing in most of basketball now, where it's like, all right, just look at the 3-point column. Who had the higher percentage? Cool. Did they win? Yep. But in this game, I mean, Kentucky was 49% from the floor, 40% from three. Tennessee was 50.9% from the floor, but only 26.3% from three. But it comes down to those offensive rebounds, those second chances, and Tennessee's ability to kill defensive possessions by just out rebounding Kentucky.
And it wasn't a matter of them outmatching Kentucky with size, because Amari Williams had a good performance. You know, they have Andrew Carr on that team. They have some size on Kentucky, but really what it come down to is you mentioned that this was a classic Tennessee game. Not for me, it wasn't so much in the manner that yes, they were up and they just did enough to hang on at the end, but it was the guard play. I mean, Ziegler, Lanier, Gainey coming off the bench had a couple of real big time buckets, some momentum swinging type plays that Tennessee just has, you know, pretty much consistently. Even Dubar like came in and had some positive moments, and I've been waiting for that all season long, because Darling Stone was supposed to have been a guy, in my opinion, who was just going to wreck house and draw more attention to his name. That didn't happen. Same with Igor Milicic. Like, he was all right. He did enough to contribute. It just felt like the backcourt for Tennessee was what propelled them in this win. Kentucky, not so much. Brea had a really tough shooting day.
Yeah.
Like, as great as he looked the other night, it was like, okay, this is why everybody how come this guy isn't a draft guy? How come I'm not seeing anybody putting him in the second round or anything like that? Performances like this are why, and they happen more frequently than the NCAA tournament when they lend one to believe. Lamont Butler, again, one-arm man out there playing his heart out. The further you advance, the more magnified a player's limitations like that are going to be. And, you know, Carr laid a dud for Kentucky. There wasn't a lot of help for this team. I mean, Otega Owe was probably their most consistent guy, and he wasn't even that. It wasn't even his best game. Amari Williams had some really good moments, played some good defense, rebound. I think he either led the team in assists or was tied in assists with just like 3. So Kentucky didn't really move the ball. And if they did, the open players didn't convert from deep. And that's what really killed their team. You know, even though Tennessee wasn't on fire from outside, they did enough to be respectable, and their defense just really held true.
Yeah, and you kind of talk about the difference in the backcourt where, you know, Ziegler and Lanier really showed up in a big way for Tennessee. Lamont Butler was fantastic, I thought, for Kentucky. 18 points on 7 of 10 shooting, 4 or 5 from 3, 6 and 3, playing with one arm. We see the brace, the padding on that left arm, and, you know, he races it over his head once, twice, 3 times, you know, 3 times throughout the entire game. Kobe Brea, 1 of 7 shooting, just brutal,
Yep.
especially after that game that he had in the round of 32 where he was magnificent. And, you know, the numbers in terms of percentages have been good for the last 2-3 years. But his overall involvement and when he, you know, responsibility kind of gets heightened up and really ramped up, we kind of see this stuff more often than not. And then Otega Owe put up some solid counting stats, but, you know, then it's like, all right, well, he was only 5 of 12 shooting, 3 turnovers, 4 fouls, never really found that rhythm. And it's just Tennessee did just such a good job of controlling everything in this game, despite some really strong performances from the upperclassmen like Lamont Butler and Amari Williams. Those guys kind of showed up. They were impressive. They played well, but it just wasn't enough to overcome just the constant execution by basically everyone on Tennessee, even on a night where they weren't lights out from 3.
Yeah, and I think too that Coach Pope has, and rightfully so, he's been praised for his coaching, his scheme, the way that he gets people open consistently. I feel like we almost kind of take Coach Barnes for granted in that regard, where we get real upset with his teams oftentimes, and sometimes it's justified, but we routinely see Tennessee in these types of situations where they get to a certain point and they rely on a very small rotation, and even within that rotation, the people that they lean on the most, it's even more, it's like an even smaller number, right? So 3 guards carrying this team. I'm really interested to see how that translates, especially in their next matchup. But it lent itself well to Kentucky, and I really wasn't expecting it because I thought that the depth and the schemes that Coach Pope runs, I thought they were going to make for a better game. But Coach Barnes is just reminding everybody, like, hey, I'm a pretty daggone good coach. I've been doing this a while.
Kind of knows what he's doing, turns out. All
Yeah,
right,
go
let's
figure.
let's move on to Auburn taking down Michigan 78-65. Really kind of sloppy, poorly executed game from both teams on both sides of the
Yeah,
ball. This game was an absolute mess for basically the entire time. First half was super sloppy, but close, fun, chaotic. Coming out of halftime, Michigan goes on a big run, gets up like 10, and then from there, I mean, it's just an onslaught by Auburn, who goes on like a 30-6 run to close it out. Just absolute domination down the stretch. Both teams with 15 turnovers, both shot below 40% from the floor, both shot below 30% from three. Just gross. I thought Danny Wolf was kind of the standout for Michigan with 20 and 6.
yep.
Vlad Golden was awful in this game. I thought just 2 of 9 shooting, got bullied on the boards was a big reason why Michigan got dominated on the glass. This was the worst I've seen him look in a long time. He was really good pretty much all year. I thought he was a disaster for Michigan. Broom put up really good numbers, 22 and 16, but shot 9 of 12, had 5 turnovers, fouled out. I kind of came away with more questions than concerns with him than like answers and excitement. Michigan's guards were a complete no-show yet again, kind of story of their season when they go on these big
Yep.
and really show up. Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden have almost always been there. They almost always get their numbers. But when Michigan wins, it's because a couple of their guards show up. Got none of that. Roddy Gale obviously had the massive game against A&M. He was okay, 9 points. Trey Donaldson was nowhere to be seen. Reuben Jones, nothing. LJ Kaysen, he's a freshman, so, whatever. But the freshman who really stood out was Tahad Pettiford on Auburn.
Whew.
Incredible down the stretch. Only 2 of 7 from 3, but 20 points, 3 assists, 7 of 14 shooting overall. He was incredible down the stretch, especially late in one of the big catalysts for that run that Auburn went on. But again, the story of this game, aside from the turnovers and sloppiness, was Auburn out-rebounded Michigan 48-33, including 19 offensive rebounds, while Michigan had just 23 defensive rebounds. You can't win with that.
You can't. And I want to shout out Maxwell, who continues to say that Cardwell is an NBA big, and he looks like it. To me, he's just like that quintessential teammate where he's going to carve out openings for everybody else, or that are going to benefit from all the work that he does. He boxes. It's almost like that Steven Adams type role, right? Where Steven Adams doesn't get a lot of the rebounds, but everybody else does because Steven Adams is out there carving out lanes for everybody else. I felt like Cardwell kind of does that. I think that Broom was solid. It wasn't his best performance, but I feel like it's kind of like that quintessential Janai Broom type game where it's like, I don't know how you're doing this, man, but you're getting like 20 and 16 and a couple of blocks and some assists and stuff. You're hitting threes, and he benefits from these almost travels that like never get called on him too. I don't know if you've noticed. I'm sure you do, but he always gets like that almost like half shuffle that always goes his way and doesn't get the whistle blown on him. And I'm a Broom fan, so I feel like I can say that. But Tahad Pettiford, my goodness, Corey had been high on him all season long. It didn't take long for me to be on that bandwagon myself. I think the play that perfectly encapsulates a Bruce Pearl team was when Pettiford came up and they were running like this horn set, and they were looking to set a screen for Pettiford, but Broom was like, I'm not setting a screen. And Pettiford's like, yes, you are. He's like, no, I'm not. And then he just pulls up a 3 and drains it. And it's like he's barking at Broom, like, this is, you listen to what I say, And he's the youngest guy on this team. And or at least
By
one
almost
that
a
plays
decade.
anyway. By almost a decade. I think that he is Janai Broom's like grandson, But in all seriousness, Pettiford just has the stones and the onions on this team that keeps them going. And it's just been so much fun to see him take advantage of this tournament, because I feel like he's probably going to be the best, like the greatest benefactor of March Madness, like going in his favor compared to anybody else. And I love Jace Richardson. Like I love Jace. I don't know if I would rather have him over Tahad at this point. And I think it's close. I really do. But the thing that I think that makes Pettiford a little bit better is we see the defense. Like he rose up and blocked a center. He shoots passing lanes. He plays like really dogged defense. And I think too that we've seen him run the pick and roll and facilitate a little bit better. And we know that he can shoot as well. So I don't know. I think that little 1v1 could be a lot of fun if we ever see that. But big fan of Pettiford, and Auburn just continues to prove that their guards are not big P words in accordance to Bruce Pearl.
Yeah, they were just the more physical team. They wanted it more, and they didn't shy away from the challenge or the limelight, or when they faced adversity early in that second half, like, all right, fine, let's go play, let's go bully these guys, and they did. I thought a lot
Denver
of
Jones, big game, big game.
Yeah. And it helps when the average age of your team is older than the Atlanta Hawks. So, there's always that too. But it was just a real testament to that team's overall tenacity and relentlessness, and how they're just going to keep coming at you, even if they're not running pretty stuff, even if they aren't executing, even if they aren't taking care of the ball, even if shots aren't falling. They have two bigs who are excellent rebounders, who are really physical and going to muck things up on the boards. And their guards are going to rebound and get in there and do the dirty work as well. And, that was a big thing too, where even though, they shot below 30% from three, which this is a team that can get really hot from three with Denver Jones and Baker Mazzara and Miles Kelly and Pettiford. They can. This wasn't one of those nights, but on those long rebounds, their guards were getting in there and grabbing those loose balls and beating Michigan to basically every single one. And just that having to defend for a minute plus multiple times over and over and over and over again for Michigan, just they couldn't do it. The better team won. It was the right outcome. And now I don't have to worry about Michigan losing to Michigan State for the third time this year. So, a tiny silver lining. All right, let's move on to the last game from Friday night. Houston over Purdue, 62-60. I've been calling this Purdue team frauds the entire time, and they've continued to spit in my face, and almost did it yet again. This game was pretty gross, but the ATO that Houston drew up for the game winner for Milos Uzan, stunning, absolute perfection, really, really gorgeous set. And Milos Uzan was by far the kind of standout in this game the entire night. Obviously had the game winner, but also finished with 22, 6 and 3 on 8 for 17 shooting and 6 of 9 from 3. He was just incredible.
Yeah, it took a career performance from deep from Uzan to see Houston kind of proceed on. And this is coming off of heels of LJ Cryer being lights out the game before, and he didn't hit any shots until he really needed to in the second half. Like the only three that he hit was the most important three probably of the game, because that's really what kind of allowed Houston to claw back into this game. It was just so interesting too. It's almost reminiscent of the Tennessee game, where Houston is going to live off the production of the guards. Their front court is largely there to set screens, rebound, and play defense. And that's exactly what we saw. Uzan you knew from early on that he was in store for some sort of a big night. Probably couldn't have called it a career best from three, but you knew that he was really feeling himself. Even on offensive rebounds, those kickback outs to him where he shoots a shot, and it's such a strange trajectory coming off of his hand. It feels like it's just like a video game glitch where it just goes from his hand right to the basket almost. It was a lot of fun to watch, but Houston just showing that defense wins games and can lead you to championships so long as you have just enough offense from your guards. But I want to shout out Lawyer for Purdue.
Yeah.
He was phenomenal like the whole game. TKR had some decent moments, but really between Lawyer and Smith, just driving and kicking all game, like doing his best Scott Skiles impression. 15 assists is nothing to sneeze at. You probably want to see him be a little bit more aggressive scoring wise, because it seemed like whenever he was assertive, it really panned out in his favor. Purdue relied on 3 guys. It felt like Houston relied on 3 guys, and it came down to the wire. I mean, and again, that after the timeout cut coming in off a baseline to Uzan was just okay. Like, this is why Coach Sampson is always in this position, because he is just a basketball genius and his team is just full of dogs.
Yeah, I'm glad that you kind of shouted out Fletcher Lawyer, because he was kind of coming into the year. I was like, oh, I wonder if there's like a sneaky outside chance that this dude just lights it up from 3. You know, he's always been a solid player, but he's struggled for the vast majority of this year, but showed up in a big way. I think he finished with 16, shot it really well. Braden Smith just too quiet of a scoring game, unfortunately for Purdue. It wasn't enough to overcome. But again, kind of similar to that Auburn game, I thought a big kind of story of this was the rebounding differential, where Houston out rebounded them 38-29, but 16 offensive rebounds to just 22 defensive rebounds for Purdue. That exact kind of same mentality, and that's what we've seen from Houston throughout the Sampson era, is that they're going to punish you on the glass. They will beat you to every loose ball. If it's a 50-50 ball, they're going to get it. And they just kind of do this over and over and over again. But like you said, now they have multiple shot makers and guys on the perimeter who can kind of bail them out, who can get their own points, who can get to that 20+ mark. And it's not just one guy. So if that one guy is having an off night, like in the past, whereas Jamal Shed when he got hurt last year, or like a Marcus Sasser, if he had an off night, it's like, all right, well, those guys are gone. They're kind of screwed now. Now it's like, all right, is it going to be Cryer? Is it going to be Uzan? Is it going to be Emmanuel Sharp, who didn't shoot at all that great, but got to double digits, got to the line a handful of times, attacked the rim, played physical. So it's like all those guys are defending, but now they have multiple guys who can fill up the points and who can get hot from outside and have a big scoring night. And we have yet to kind of really see in this tournament multiple of those guys do it at the same time. We saw it in the regular season. And I'm just kind of waiting for that dam to break where it's like, all right, now Cryer's getting to 20 and Uzan's getting to 15-20 and Emmanuel Sharp is going 6 of 7 from 3. And it's just kind of this onslaught along with the physicality of their front court. So great job by Houston to kind of survive. Purdue did a really good job of, mucking it up and trying to kind of beat Houston at their own game. But Milos Uzan was the difference maker. That ATO was the difference maker. And Houston just has too many pieces, especially when we look at their teams from the past couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, even if you beat Houston, you don't feel good afterwards.
No.
Like it's like running through cheese graters. You like, okay, cool, I made it to the other side, but I'm missing like my left arm or whatever. Shout out to Lamont Butler. It's just hard to beat that team.
Yeah.
But again, one thing that I feel like we've pointed out, and I'm interesting to see it kind of bear its own fruit, is it feels like the teams that has the most size is what's winning. I'm hoping that Houston can buck that trend because they have some strength and they have dogs on this team. And, JoJo Tugler with his arm straight up is probably as big as the basket, but he's not very tall, so I'm interested to see what they look like when they start coming up against these teams that have like big, girthy, meaty front court players, because it doesn't feel like they are getting tested in that regard. And shout out to the human-sized cheese graters. I think that would be a great jersey.
Okay, let's move on. Elite Eight preview. We have some, I know it's chalk, but that gives us the best basketball games. We're just going to kind of go in order. In terms of schedule time. So first game on the slate, Texas Tech versus Florida. Florida is favored by 6.5 in this game. What kind of stands out to you? Where do you want to start with this game?
I think that's probably the most in agreement I've been with these lines that we've covered, because I think Florida's got the guards to match up with Texas Tech, and they've obviously got the sides to kind of battle top. And I'm interested to see who draws the Darren Williams assignment, but I also could point to Tech and say who's guarding Walter Clayton, who's guarding Alex Condon, who's guarding Will Richard, who could be in for a big game, because it feels like every time we don't talk about Will Richard is whenever he drops 16 and it's like, hey guys, I'm here. You know what I mean? So I'm very interested in the matchups in this game. How are you feeling about
I think it's going to be really, really interesting. Especially kind of with the guard matchup, because Texas Tech has two awesome guards in Elijah Hawkins and Christian Anderson. I'm not seeing anything on whether or not Chance McMillan is playing or not. So I'm kind of guessing he's not, which is, again, sucks for Tech and, for us who don't have a rooting interest. But on the Florida side, they have awesome guards as well, who also have a size advantage, where both Christian Anderson and Elijah Hawkins are small guards. They're shifty, they're quick, they're fun, they're versatile. But so are Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, Will Richard, and they have that size and strength advantage as well. So I think that's going to be really interesting. I keep kind of struggling with JT Toppin, because it's like, man, I don't think you're big enough to be kind of a primary center or a primary rim protector. But he's relentless. He's
it? Yeah.
he's just inevitable at this point, and I'm fascinated to see how he deals with a team that has not just like one center who's significantly bigger than him, but 4, 5 guys between
Yeah.
Condon, Chinyelu, Hangleton, Thomas Hawk,
Yeah.
Sam Alexis got minutes in the last game when Condon rolled his ankle. So it's like they have so much gosh darn size and versatility and physicality everywhere, just throughout the lineup. And if guys are making their shots, if they're executing, I could see Florida kind of running away with this, because I don't think Texas Tech is going to be able to kind of shoot as inefficiently as they did against Arkansas. And we kind of knew that closing games out for Arkansas has been an issue for them all year. A lot of that is just because of their youth. I don't think that's going to be an issue with Florida, especially with Walter Clayton, who we've seen time and time again just make big time shots, big time plays down the stretch. I would be pretty surprised if Florida doesn't win this.
Yeah, and I gotta shout out my guy Elijah Martin. I think that
Yeah.
whoever draws him on the opposite side of them, they're going to be in for a rough day, and that could be any of their guards. Especially if Texas Tech does their thing where they want to stagger him, and I could even see him trying to get up in Darren Williams' chest too and make him uncomfortable as like that second side distributor. So there's a lot of different ways that Coach Golden can go about this, but I'm a big fan of what he's doing. And not only does Florida got the size advantage, but the depth. Like they could continue, they can send out so many guys that could continue to execute their philosophy and whatever it is that they want to do. And Tech, I don't think that they're going to have that luxury. They're going to, a lot of their stars are going to see a lot of different bodies, and that can work in their favor, but I'm of the mindset to where that's going to kind of be their detriment. Is like you're just going to get bludgeoned. You're going to see so many different looks that are going to make you uncomfortable, and a lot of times the defense is going to have the size advantage. So that's kind of what it comes down to. I look for Florida to be killers on the glass. I think Toppin still gets his rebounds, but
He's
as far
going to
as
get
team
15
rebounding
to 20.
goes, yeah. But who knows? I mean, it could be just a stellar Toppin performance, and he could be enough, because he is a load.
Yeah, and I don't want to say Texas Tech or come across like Texas Tech has no chance at this, because they absolutely
Sure.
do. It's just more of that. I don't think they can survive another game where they have two incredibly inefficient performances from two of their main guys, whether it's Elijah Hawkins, Christian Anderson, Darren Williams, or JT Toppin. I think if multiple of those guys kind of struggle to find a groove early, then I think they could get ugly. If all of those guys are very capable of coming out really hot, finding a rhythm, the ball's swinging all over the place. Anderson and Hawkins are, getting to the rim, kicking out, creating easy looks, getting in that rhythm, putting Florida on their back foot. That's kind of the only way I see Tech having a chance, is if all these guys on Tech really find that rhythm early. We know they're not going to go away. We know they're going to fight till the end. It's going to be physical. They're never going to quit. But I just think the margin for error, especially with Florida, is so much smaller. So I'm going to take Florida with the points in this one. Who you taking?
I'm with you. I'm
Okay.
I'm with you. Florida in the points.
Okay. Moving on to the primetime game tonight. Duke, 1 seed versus number 2 seed Alabama. Duke is favored by 7.5 in this one. Obviously, Alabama had that historic shooting performance in the Sweet 16. Mark Sears was insane. Uh, but like you said before we hit recording here and before we went live, Duke has Cooper Flag. So
Yes.
where do you want to start in this one?
This is tough because it's almost like what the Super Bowl was, where it was the Chiefs versus the Eagles. And you look at the Eagles and you're like, they're so deep, they have all these players. But the Chiefs got Patrick Mahomes. So like who do you go with here? I and Gregory Castillo in the chat, shout out to everybody who's tuning in. Says matchup between Nelson and Cooper. I don't think Bama wants that. Like I love Grant Nelson. Like as a college basketball player, I think that he's solid. I don't think that he wants that smoke. Like, he is just not going to be able to move with Cooper. He's not going to be able to score over Cooper. I think that all the strengths that you get with a guy like Grant Nelson are completely out the window if he draws that assignment. It's that they're gone. See you later. And then you got to rely on the combination of Mark Sears and Aiden Holloway being efficient as guards, while they also they have to draw the defensive assignments the right way as well. I think where Alabama probably has an advantage is by Cliff O'Murray against Malawak, who Malawak has been in and out. He's the full experience of him all year has continued into the playoffs. I worry about that. Concanipple is a madman. He is a crazy competitor. He probably draws the Youngblood assignment, in my opinion. If not, I don't know who does. And so I just think that the pressure points that Duke can apply on this Alabama team, even though they are probably deeper, and I think that Duke can make them uncomfortable. And then you got to worry about Tyrese Proctor dropping 25 off of, shooting 6 of 8 from deep, something along those lines. It's hard. It's really difficult for me to imagine Alabama winning, even though I would say top to bottom, they have the experience and depth advantage, but Duke's got the right people, in my opinion, to pull this one off.
I just think Duke's like a matchup nightmare. And in terms of like defensively, who is Alabama going to put on Cooper Flag? I would imagine it's more probably I would guess they go more the young blood Diabate route, and try and throw those guys on him, and then that keeps Grant Nelson from hopefully getting in foul trouble, allows him to kind of be a little more effective, rebounding, getting out in transition, pushing the pace, and acting more as that weak side kind of rim protector rather than an on-ball defender. I think if they throw Grant Nelson on Cooper Flag, it's going to go really poorly.
Yeah.
But aside from Cooper, I think the biggest mismatch is in the backcourt. I don't know who this is going to be. Huge LeBaron Philon game in terms of defense and who he has to guard, because I don't know who Mark Sears and Aiden Holloway can survive on. And I guess Tyrese Proctor, but they're in a significant size and strength disadvantage with Sion James and Con Knipple. I just think Duke has way too much size, way too much physicality. And if Alabama just turns this into a run and gun matchup like they want to, and knocks down threes early and gets out to a really hot pace, they're going to have to maintain that for 40 minutes. And I'm not entirely sure that they can against a team that's this big, this effective, with this much kind of versatility from top to bottom. I just think this is really, really tough for Alabama to match up with, basically from 1 through 5.
Yeah, I think Phylon is probably, now that I'm thinking about it a little bit more like individually, I would imagine that he draws the Concanipple assignment, and that might work in spurts, but you got to think of those John Shire actions that they're going to run to get him open.
Yeah.
Phylon's going to be put to the test. He really is. And then Sion James guards, I mean, you could get away with him on Sears, I believe. You know, like that point of attack defense is pretty tough. And if you want to disrupt Alabama, you gotta. It starts with the guards, and
Yeah.
I think that Duke's got what it takes to really pull that off, in my opinion.
Yeah, and my guess is they throw Sears on Proctor, just because there's not quite as much physicality and size difference
Shootout.
there. Proctor's turning into a little more of a spot up guy, so then you're able to kind of throw Youngblood on James. You kind of have that strength matchup: Diabate on Flag, Omori on Maluach, and Phylon on Khan. That's solid for the starters, but then like once you kind of get into the bench and you have to start rotating guys, I think this is a really big uphill battle for Alabama, just because Duke can kill you in a million different ways. So Duke is
That said,
favored.
who do you like? Who do you like as far as points goes?
Duke is favored by 7.5. I'm gonna take Duke in the points. I think they're just almost inevitable at this point. They just look so incredibly well rounded, and they're executing everything at such a high level. The game looks incredibly slow for everyone out there. Alabama could absolutely disrupt that by getting out to a hot start. They jump out to a 20-7 lead or something early, and they're able to maintain that. But I see, in terms of like path to success and a win, I just think Duke has about 1,000 of them, and Alabama has like 2 or 3.
So I think the coaching advantage, in my opinion, goes the way of Alabama. I think
Oh,
Coach Oates
interesting.
is a great coach. I'm not saying Shire isn't. I think that Oates is a player or is a coach who I would slightly trust a little bit more, which I think makes this game a little bit interesting. And when you talk about going to the bench, I kind of like Bama's bench a little bit more. They
Mhm.
got Diabate coming in off the bench, Aiden Holloway coming in off the bench. Jaron Stevenson gives them a lot of size and athleticism among the front court as well. So I think Duke wins, but I would say under 7.5. I think it's
Okay.
probably like a 4 to 6 point victory.
Okay. It makes sense. Um, Anything else on this game? Obviously, from a prospect standpoint, ton of names to keep an eye on. Khan, Cooper, Malawach, Isaiah Evans. It'll be interesting to see if he comes in. Uh,
Yeah.
he's a guy who is like, seems like he was tailor made to play in that Alabama system, where it's like, oh, catch ball, shoot ball, and it's like you have one decision to make, and it's whether or not you're going to shoot, and the decision is always yes. Tyrese Proctor, Sion James, they're some upperclassmen, both playing incredibly well all year. And then it'd be fascinating to see if Grant Nelson can kind of get hot, find a rhythm. Mark Sears helping himself, and whether or not I think if LeBaron Philon can find a scoring rhythm and impact the game outside of just defense, and just passing, that'll be huge for him.
Yeah, it's just going to be fascinating to see. I think Cooper just came off of probably the best tournament performance out of anybody.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to follow that up. So maybe you expect a little bit of regression, but a regression for Cooper is like, okay, I only dropped 25 instead of 30.
Yeah.
So there's going to be that. I'm interested to see Khan. I want to see how Alabama feels attacking him, even though that they got to deal with Cooper coming in off the weak side and kind of helping him clean up. I'm interested to see how Cliff Omuri goes against him. I was a big Cliff guy. I thought that he was going to have a strong possibility coming in, potentially being like a second round guy. Could still find his way into the league for a cup of coffee, but I'm interested to watch that matchup because I want to see what Malawach does. I feel like he's probably one of the more divisive guys in the draft. You kind of wonder, okay, their rim protection numbers aren't all that great. And is that schematic? Is that limitations? It's you kind of want to see what he looks like when he's not playing next to the number one pick in this draft, who might be like one of the best prospects to ever play, and see what he looks like on his own 2 feet. I'm interested to watch Malawach. Khan is really becoming like undeniable as a prospect.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how high you like how dangerous is too dangerous for a guy like him. And then Alabama has like less than a handful of guys who I think could be second rounders, Phylon, depending on how he plays in this game, has a shot to be a first round guy. There's some people who are super high on him, like Jay Kyle. I think had him like top 10, and
so.
I get it. I get that he's a big processor. I would like to see the process turn into like more consistent offensive production for himself.
Just one last kind of point on Khan. I think this will be a really kind of interesting test case to see how he does against those quicker, really high paced offenses. I have Khan top 10. I love his game. I think he's a much better defender than people tend to give him credit for. Really strong, moves his feet really well. But I wouldn't exactly describe him as fleet of foot. So it'll be interesting to see how he kind of handles that kind of quickness and physicality of Phylon, the speed of Holloway and Mark Sears and all those guys. So I think it'll be a really fun matchup. And there's a reason it's in prime time. All right, let's move on to Sunday slate. First game of the day, Houston versus Tennessee. Houston is favored by 3.5. What kind of catches your eye on this one?
It's like relatives getting to a fight at a barbecue, in my opinion. Tennessee and Houston, they're just so close in style of play, the types of players that they like to rely on, I would say rotation-wise and the importance put on certain positions. They're almost spitting image of each other. And it's who do you trust more in a dogfight? And I really have no idea. What's the line on this one?
3.5 for Houston.
I think that's right. It's going to be a close game, and it's probably going to come – if Purdue can make a Houston game close, like Tennessee should be able to do the same thing, especially with Zakai Ziegler kind of taking that, Smith role that we just saw, except he'd be more aggressive as a shooter. Lanier there's going to be a lot placed on his shoulders, just like there's going to be put on Cryer and Uzan. It's going to come down to who's more efficient out of the backcourt. And that's where I'm really having a hard time. You got Gainey who can come in off the bench for Tennessee, whereas Houston starts all three of their guards. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I'm interested to see the Juwan Roberts matchup and see who he draws, whether it's going to be Okpara or it's going to be Milicic. This would be a great Milicic game because I feel like the front court stretching out Houston might be very beneficial for Tennessee, and that's kind of the advantage that Milicic brings. So I have no idea. I literally have no idea. I could easily see Houston just because they're the higher seed. I trust their coaching probably a smidge more, but it's going to be a in the mud fight the whole game.
Yeah, I think Igor is probably the kind of X factor in this one for Tennessee. Whereas if he can knock down a couple jumpers, I would guess they probably put Tugler on him just since he's a little more kind of fluid than Roberts.
Yeah.
And leave Roberts on Okpara. I really like Felix Okpara. But if they can kind of pull Tugler away from the rim a little bit more, at least get one of those kind of explosive shot blockers and rebounders out of the paint, open stuff up a little bit more, kind of get downhill, create a few more driving lanes potentially, maybe create a few extra opportunities for some offensive rebounds. That could really be the difference. But if they're able to kind of sag off of Igor and not really worry about him on the perimeter, I just struggle to kind of bet against this Houston team. I think they're just so well-rounded. I trust their guards a little more than Tennessee's. I would imagine Lanier has his 18 to 23 points on the night. It'll be interesting to see how they kind of deal with Zakai Ziegler. LJ Cryer's really improved as a defender and that kind of mindset. But can they get something from Maychek or Gainey a little more consistently, and can they really rely on those guys? And I'm not quite sure I trust those guys quite as much as I trust the trio of Sharp, Uzan, and Cryer. So I'm with you. I think that's a really good line. I lean Houston.
Just stay away.
It is. I'm staying away from the spread. I lean Houston to win. Just because I think this is the best Houston team we've seen in quite some time. I think they're so well-rounded. And I think I trust their front court. The back court, I think, is really, really close. I trust Houston's front court a little more than Tennessee's. Igor's fun. I like him. he kind of comes and goes. Though I like Okpara a lot, but again, what are you getting from him on the offensive end? Can he deal consistently with the strength and physicality of those two guys? So I like Houston to win. I think it's going to be really, really close, though.
I agree. I think it's going to come down to who scores more between Milicic and Tug. Like if Tugler scores 6 points, like if you just look at the box score without the total points, if Tugler gets the 6 points, you feel
It's
like
such a
Houston
low bar.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's not an offensive guy,
No,
so
he's not.
if he's scoring 6, then you're feeling pretty good about Houston's chances. Where Milicic, I feel like if he scores 8 or more, then you're probably looking at a victory for Tennessee. So I don't know. I wouldn't bet this game. If I got to pick, I'm just going with Houston because I think Gainey is going to be between Milicic and Gainey, they're going to be the X factors for Tennessee. And then for Houston, if you could get any sort of offense from your front court, like if Roberts is getting to that patent end, like put someone on his right shoulder, left push shot going in, he's feeling that, then Houston's probably walking away clean. It's just a tough matchup. Like this is why you want it to go chalk because you get these sibling rivalries almost.
What I'm hoping we get is an Emmanuel Sharp versus Chaz Lanier just shootout, and both these teams that somehow end up in the 80s. I'm not banking on that. I feel like we're going to get a 67-64 knockdown brawl.
If their shoulders rub together, there might be a fire on the court. We got to keep the beefiness away from each other.
All right, let's move on to last game of the weekend. Auburn versus Michigan State. Another 1-2 matchup. Auburn is favored by 4.5. What jumps out to you in this one?
I think that line's too low for Auburn. I think that the size of Auburn is going to really hurt Michigan State. Like they have a little bit of size, but I don't think that they have an answer for Cardwell. I don't think that they have an answer for Broome. I think that they have guards that can kind of keep up with like a Pettiford or Denver Jones and make their lives a little bit more difficult. But I feel like the defense of Auburn, the size of Auburn, the rebounding, I think is going to be the key. Carr could make things interesting for whoever it is that he's guarding. I think that between Jones and Pettiford, who's ever out there, you just say, hey, Carr, go out there. Like Danny from the Replacements, give me the ball. You go out there and tell Carr, hey, give me the ball. Between those matchups, I'm interested to see who guards Jace. Yeah. I think I would love to see Chad Baker-Mazara just like talking trash to Jace the whole game and just see what his response is going to be. I think that's going to be a great personality test for the NBA. Is how do you respond when Chad Baker-Mazara is in your ear for 40 minutes? So. It's going to be interesting to see. It's a fun, like, styles make fights matchup, I feel like, in this. I just think with the defense, the size, and even the three-point shooting that can come with an Auburn team, I think it's going to overwhelm Michigan State, who has just enough youth to be a little bit more inexperienced. This is why you bring in so many upperclassmen who are strong and proven commodities, is so when you get late in the year, you have that kind of advantage. I just think that they're just going to bludgeon Michigan State. I'd probably go over on that for Auburn.
I tend to lean in the same direction. And it feels like Auburn should dominate the boards, but for somehow this Michigan State team has just been one of the best rebounding teams in the country all year. It's like you don't have that standout kind of front court. How are you doing this? And it's by committee. Everyone all five guys on the court for them rebound at a really high level, and they have really good rebounding guards in Akins and Fears, and Jace is a really solid rebounder for his size.
Yep.
Trey Holloman is a dog. And then, obviously Cohen Carr. I feel like Cohen Carr is either going to kind of be the X factor or like almost a trap for Michigan State, because if on one hand it's like, man, if we can get him out and pick up the pace and get in the open court and get some easy ones in transition, that's gonna be awesome. But then it's like Auburn also wants to play at that really high frenetic pace too and get up and down, so it's like, okay, now they're getting into a rhythm. I think this is gonna be a massive this should be a massive Janiyah Broome game. give him the ball on the block, let him go to work, get to that kind of like little left-hand baby hook that he's so comfortable with, get him to the elbow, let him face up occasionally. And then if he gets in that rhythm early and Michigan State has to start sending an extra guy, now can he start utilizing the passing ability that we've seen grow so much over the years and find a Denver Jones or Pettiford spotting up or Chad Baker Mazzara or Miles Kelly, or throw those backdoor lobs to Cardwell as he kind of cuts in from the dunker spot. I think there are a lot of opportunities for Auburn to kind of dismantle this Michigan State team, but State just doesn't make mistakes. They execute everything on both ends of the floor. Everyone, they're so well connected. Their chemistry is off the charts. They play so well together. And Auburn, as we just saw against Michigan, are prone to make mistakes constantly. They can be sloppy with the ball. They can get cold shooting. And they can give up just a ton of easy looks occasionally. And it seems like their offense and their overall level of execution hasn't been where it needed to be for like the last month or two even. So I don't really have any doubts about Michigan State executing and doing their job and playing to the game plan. And it's just, what kind of Auburn team are we going to get? Are we going to get a psycho Chad Baker Mazzara who shoots themselves in the foot constantly? Or are we going to get the kind of absurdly dominant team that we saw in early January? If we get that one, I think this one could get out of hand. But this Michigan State team just kind of continues to prove over and over again that they're just really, really good.
They are, and I'm not trying to slight them at all, and it probably sounds like I am. I just think that, coaching advantage, I think, does go to Michigan State, even though Bruce Pearl is a heck of a coach. But I mean, Izzo is a legend, like a legend's legend. He's your favorite coach's favorite coach. But when I look at a team who can bring in like a Chaney Johnson off the bench or a Tahad Pettiford off the bench, I mean, that's such a crazy luxury. I mean, Chaney Johnson is like the unsung hero for Auburn because he can come in and guard 3 through 5 pretty easily, depending on the matchup. Frankie Fiddler on the other bench is hit and miss. He's relied upon pretty consistently. So if I'm looking at, when it comes down to who I'm bringing in off the bench, Auburn, I think's got the advantage. I like the size and rebounding advantage. I just think that, again, I'm kind of falling and dying on the sword, but who's got the most size is kind of proving to win, depending on how the brackets line up. Again, Houston, Tennessee kind of like lucked out, in my opinion, on where they fall in this regard. But I think that Auburn's just got such size, athleticism, and experience advantage that it might kind of overwhelm some of the talent that Michigan State has. And you really got to rely on Jaden Akins to be what he has shown all game. Like if he's like 16 points or under, you don't like Michigan State's chances. He's got to be around like that 20 points. And you kind of hope that Cohen Carr is putting up like that 12 to 15 points. And then you need Jace to not drop another game like what we just saw a couple nights ago. So I just feel like the proven commodities between the two teams goes in Auburn's favor, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see how they match up with Jace specifically. I think there are a lot of really interesting ways that they could go at him, whether it's by committee or just throw Denver Jones or Baker Mazzara and just be like, hey, just face guard this guy. I don't care about you digging on drives or helping in rotations. Just be in his face every minute he's on the court. And I think that'll be really, really interesting because that's going to disrupt, obviously not give him some of the wide open looks that he was able to get in a rhythm against Ole Miss, or some of those DHO second side kind of pick and roll opportunities that he's executed at a high level all year. So I think it's going to be really fun. Auburn is favored by 4.5. I'm probably going to take Auburn with the points. I don't love it. I don't trust them at all. But if not now, then when? So I'm going to go Auburn with the points.
I agree. I'd probably even go over. I think that it could get close in the end, especially like fouls and stuff like that, depending on who they're putting on the line. You don't want Cardwell on the line. Broom has been kind of inconsistent on the line. late in the game. So you get into weird rotation things where you get the offense for defense substitutions that you typically see in college. I don't know. It's closer than what I think like your gut would tell you if you're pulling for Auburn, but I'm probably gonna go like Auburn by like 6 or 7.
Yeah, that's kind of the range I'm kind of getting at too. But
Yeah.
should be another really fun weekend of games. I know chalk is boring for some people, but this gives us the best basketball possible. A lot of guys to keep an eye on in terms of draft stuff. This is awesome yet again. I really enjoyed doing all these shows throughout the tournament. Shout out to everyone in the chat. Appreciate you guys watching along live. But he is Stephen Gillaspie. I'm Tyler Metcalf. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. But until next time, see ya.